once again, hello, I am Emily Burns. I'm the program director with Sky Island Alliance. I've been with the organization for 4 years, and I used to be a plant biologist studying climate change issues in the redwood forest. And I came to the Southwest 4 years ago and have been totally hooked by studying wildlife with my colleagues. And we're going to share more with you today about why Sky Island Alliance, our organization, is monitoring wildlife across the region and how we need your help. And I'll pass it off to Eamon to introduce himself.
Good afternoon. Hey, everyone. My name is Eamon Hardy. I am the wildlife program manager here at Sky Island Alliance, and been in Tucson for a year and a half or so. Before Sky Island, I was working on avian migration along the Colorado River. So I spent a lot of time on the sort of western edge of the Sonoran Desert. I'm excited to be here in Tucson and working with wildlife and people within the Sky Islands.
I'll take it from here. I'm Megan Bethel. I'm a wildlife specialist with Sky Island Alliance, and I was born and raised in Tucson. I started volunteering for Sky Island back in middle school, working with the wildlife camera data, and I graduated from UVA, and I love mammal ID and mammal behavior, so I'm excited to be working on these camera projects.
Awesome. Well, thank you both, Eamon and Megan, and you're going to mostly be hearing from them today. I just wanted to share a few thoughts as introduction to kick us off this evening. So next slide. First and foremost, a huge thank you to the Carol Petrie Foundation and Wilberforce Foundation. Both of these groups have been instrumental in helping our organization grow our wildlife monitoring program over the last year, and Wilberforce has had sustaining support for us for many years. So they're helping all of us work together to turn our wildlife camera data into meaningful conservation actions that can support wildlife. And so thank you to both those foundations. All right, well, we are joining you from the sort of the middle northwest corner of the Sky Island region. And for those of you that may not be familiar with that term, the Sky Island region is this interesting blending pot of ecosystems in North America. And it's a chain of kind of an array of 55 different mountain ranges. Half are in Sonora, Mexico, and half are in the US, Arizona and New Mexico. The influences that come together here, it's the Sonoran Desert and the Chihuahuan Desert. We've got neotropical influences that are coming up from even South and Central America up into North America. And then we have the influence from the Rocky Mountains, which means this is a place where we have temperate and tropical species mixing. And it's very dramatic when you go from the desert floor here in the Sonoran Desert, where you have saguaro, and you can drive for 45 minutes up to the top of a Sky Island and be in an aspen forest. It's pretty wild. I'm sure where many of you live, you also have different types of ecosystems. And our region is really interesting because we get species that live with much broader distributions than just the Sky Islands, but many different species overlap here. Over half of the birds in North America spend at least part of their life in our region. And it's a fascinating place where you can have pronghorn, ocelot, jaguar, Mexican wolf, black bear. And we're fascinated by the blending of species that live here and are very committed as an organization and have been for over 30 years to their conservation. Animals, because they are always on the move, conservation really does require understanding the obstacles that animals face in their daily life as they're moving across the landscape in search of water and food, shelter and mates. And we realize we can't just study wildlife in one place if we care about these species. We have to be caring about them across their whole, if we can, their whole distribution. And so our heart is in the Sky Islands, but many of the species we care about are much broader than our region. Next slide. So here's an example of an animal that gets us quite excited about doing our binational work, working in the US and in Mexico. Here's a wildlife camera image that has recorded a jaguar just south of the US-Mexico border. Jaguar, if you're not familiar with it, is a species that historically had a much broader distribution and had a population in what is now the United States. They were found all the way up to the Grand Canyon. Over the last 150 years, due to hunting and then habitat fragmentation and other threats, jaguar is very limited in its northern distribution. But there have been recent sightings around the US-Mexico border, even in the Chiricahua Mountains in the last few years. So it's an example species of if we're able to reconnect habitat and support habitat that is good for jaguar, it's really one of these umbrella species. If we can protect our habitat for jaguar, we believe we can protect so many other species that would also benefit from those conservation actions. Next slide. Here's one a little bit closer to home. This is about 70 miles from Tucson, a beautiful mountain lion walking through the Huachuca Mountains on the US side. Right below where this video was taken is the US-Mexico border, Coronado National Memorial, where we do a lot of research, and we'll be telling you a little bit more about that. Mountain lion is another one of these wide-ranging species. It's not unique to the Sky Island region. It's found throughout North America, but we are fascinated in how these species, this cat in particular, is able to disperse between different Sky Islands across the US-Mexico border. As you know, these species really need a big range. Males want to spread out. They don't want to be near other males. And so that habitat connectivity and allowing these cats to roam widely across the landscape is so important. Next slide. Another really fascinating example that I'm just blown away with is the American black bear. Black bear in Arizona is found in many of our mountain ranges. It's also found in Sonora. You probably have them in New Mexico as well. The black bear in Sonora is an endangered species, and the populations have dramatically decreased in Sonora. So we really think about the source and the sink for a population of black bear in Arizona, and are thinking about how we can help black bear repopulate and become more abundant in Sonora through our conservation work. So I have these two icons of the bear on the map because about 10 years ago, there was a collared black bear that was in Sonora up in the northernmost federally protected land called the Bavispe Reserve. The Mexican CONAP staff, the National Park Service staff of Mexico, had put a collar on this bear, and they followed it briefly, and then it became out of range of where they could detect it, and they weren't sure what had happened to it. And it was only, I think it was 2 months later that the head of Bavispe got a call from someone working up in Coronado National Forest, north of Tucson, and said, I think I've got your bear up here. And the bear had been seen. And we just love those stories. We love how far that one individual bear had gone. And it just shows us what a small window that we actually have as humans in understanding the distribution of species and where they pop up. We can't put collars on everything. Our organization isn't doing any collaring. Clearly, the collaring data really tells us exactly the footpaths that these animals are taking. But there are many other ways that we can approach understanding the distribution of species. And we do it in a concerted scientific effort along the US-Mexico border. And this video right here is a camera from one of our array along the border showing a black bear intersecting the US-Mexico wall. So this particular bear has been seen a few times, always walking westward along the border road next to the US-Mexico border wall at San Bernardino National Wildlife Refuge. Now, this is right in the heart of that space where I showed that bear had wanted to move back and forth between Sonora and Arizona. And so we're really thinking about the obstacles that species like bear face as they're moving. All right, well, I'm gonna pass it off to Eamon to say a little bit more about the detailed wildlife studies that we're doing along the US-Mexico border, and then we'll talk about how FotoFauna fits into that and how you can get involved.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Emily. Fascinating introduction, and I just wanted to continue and build off what you were speaking about with our wildlife cameras and different ways we can study the occurrence and distribution of wildlife in our region. To orient folks, we are looking at a map of southeastern Arizona and southwestern New Mexico. So right here where my cursor is moving up and down is the Arizona-New Mexico border. This is the boot heel of New Mexico. And as you continue east, you move throughout New Mexico. And this graph with the different colored lines along the US and Mexico border show different types of border infrastructure, where the orange lines are what we call the pedestrian barrier, or sorry, the vehicle barrier, which is more of that Normandy style fencing. The red lines are places where there's the more recent pedestrian style steel bollards, like this here in the middle photo with the deer next to the steel bollards. Areas in blue are in places where the construction damage from wall installation was pretty severe. And then the areas in gray that are scattered throughout there are places where the previous version of the pedestrian barrier, which is 18 feet, exists. And Sky Island Alliance has more than 100 wildlife cameras, and these are motion activated cameras that are stationary on the landscape and collect information on wildlife 24/7. We have more than 100 of these cameras distributed across about 90 miles of the US-Mexico border. Starting here in the San Rafael Valley, this is Nogales, Arizona, and Mexico, and this is Tucson up here. And the cameras start here and span the width of the border almost to New Mexico. Our furthest east cameras are here in San Bernardino National Wildlife Refuge, which is just about 8 miles shy of the New Mexico border. And with these cameras, they collect a mountain of data, and we can understand things about wildlife movement, where they're occurring, the community of species. Through these cameras, we've processed over 6 million photos. Which is a lot of photos. Megan, our wildlife specialist, is a true wizard at this. She processes more photos more quickly than anyone I've ever seen. But through her and a lot of work through volunteers and interns and staff time, we can turn those 6 million photos into detections or records of wildlife. And we've seen more than 130 species on our cameras. And these include things like white-tailed deer, which are widespread and known throughout North America. Things that are a little bit more regional and specialized, like the white-nosed coati, which is a neotropical animal that kind of reaches the northern extreme of its range here in our area of southeastern Arizona and southwestern New Mexico. And then numerous bird species, even certain insect species like this pipevine swallowtail. So these cameras provide a real wealth of data, and we're really excited by what we can learn from all of these camera locations. For example, we can turn data on the numbers of species and look at trends through time. So these figures on the slide show the detection rate, or the number of individual animals we're seeing per camera day. And a camera day is just the number of cameras active multiplied by the number of days those cameras were active. So if we have 2 cameras active across 5 days, that's 10 camera trap days. And we use this number and we divide the number of animals by the number of trap days to get a detection rate and look at that through time. So this graph isn't to illustrate anything in particular, just that with these data, this wealth of data, this 50,000 records of animals, we can look at how animal numbers are changing through time and start to think about the mechanisms that might be driving those changes. But this kind of work, while very insightful and really powerful, takes a lot of work. We have 100 cameras. We have to check them pretty frequently and process lots of data. And so we're limited in our geographic scope. We've got about 92 miles covered, but it takes the power of many to expand that and look at our whole region. As we saw earlier in these maps and slides and where Emily was talking about, conservation really can't be restricted to one area if we want it to be effective. We really need to look throughout the animal's distribution, throughout their entire range, and certainly across state and federal boundaries, like between Arizona and New Mexico and between the US and Mexico. Conservation needs to be across these boundaries. And so that is a really fun tool. We've turned to community support through our program called FotoFauna. FotoFauna is a community-driven effort started about 3 years ago in late 2020, and it has been a tremendous success. We're really excited about it. And folks with cameras in their backyards, different groups submit data from some city parks, from county parks, from national forests. And these data we receive and we can turn into a much broader picture of the types of animals that occur in our region, where they occur, and when they occur. And to demonstrate or illustrate this spatially, I'm going to pull up a map here, which shows the current distribution of photos or of cameras that are contributing to our FotoFauna initiative. And we see photos all the way from north of Phoenix, up in the top left corner of your slide there, all the way down to Hermosillo. That's a latitudinal range of 370 miles, which is pretty remarkable. And now if we look from east or west to east, we're going again from Phoenix all the way over into New Mexico. We recently had our first contributions from New Mexico, which we're extremely excited about. And that's a breadth of about 200 miles. And so with this FotoFauna network, we are able to, I'd say, harvest or collect data on wildlife and their occurrence across a much broader geographic range. And the FotoFauna program is very much a community-based effort. We have numerous funding support and partners, and then we also partner with a lot of different organizations and groups and people kind of throughout our region that help make this program possible. And then one final aspect of this, before we dive into sort of the more of the details about FotoFauna, is a sub-program within FotoFauna that we call the lending libraries, where we work with 2 universities in Sonora, Universidad de la Sierra, which is in Moctezuma, central northern Sonora, and then Universidad de Sonora, which is in Hermosillo. We work with 2 libraries, both closer here into Tucson, where we provide cameras that students and community members can borrow for months, just like a book or a video, and they check out that camera, and then they get to install and maintain the camera on their own lands and kind of see what's around in their backyard. And so these are another way we expand the range and engage the community with our FotoFauna program. So as a brief overview and a rapid overview, a run through of some of our wildlife programs, that was that. And I'm going to hand it off to Megan, who's going to talk a little bit more about some of the details of working with FotoFauna and FotoFauna cameras.
Hey there, everyone, and thank you, Eamon, for getting me set up nicely. So I'm just going to go over the basics of how to get started with FotoFauna. It's pretty simple. There's really 3 steps, 4 if you want to be overachiever. But the first is to select a wildlife camera or any camera that you can set outside, installing it. And it's best if you can learn some identification of how to see an animal in the picture, ideally know what it is, but we can help you with that, and to submit a monthly checklist. FotoFauna is a survey where we ask what animals show up per month on that camera. And I'll walk you through the basics of that now. So let's begin. There's so many wildlife camera options you can choose from nowadays. The technology is getting better and better every month, it seems like, and they're pretty affordable. We found some decent cameras on Amazon for about $60. I wouldn't go any cheaper than that, otherwise they'll probably break pretty quick. But it's a lot better than some of the cameras in the past that were like $500. The main workhorse we use is the Browning, but there's plenty of other mid-range cameras. I encourage looking at reviews online, see what works best. But if you don't want to worry about wildlife cameras, even a security camera like a Google Cam or a Wise camera that you can attach to your Wi-Fi or plug into your house works fine. Just something that detects motion and detects movement essentially on the landscape is all you need. The next step is placing the camera. For FotoFauna, we recommend and highly encourage to put it on your own property. If you live in town, or if you don't think that you might have animals, put a camera out. You'll be surprised to see what critters come through at night. But if you have a friend or a family member who has land out on a ranch or just outside of town, contact them and they'll probably be more than happy to put a camera out too. All we ask is you please get the permission of the landowner before putting cameras out there. Just for best practices. But once you do, the important thing is to remember where you put it. Google Maps and Gaia and other GPS apps on your phone can tell you where it is using these coordinates. And that's a really important question we ask later on in the survey, is where is this camera? So copy and paste this coordinate or write it down in a notebook and save it for later. That way you can find it later when you check it, and that way you can submit the right location to this survey as well. And yeah, one thing is you can put it on anything. You saw in that last picture, it was mounted to a bucket in a post. Best practice is to lock it, usually with a bike lock to a tree, but if you don't have a tree around, you can use fence posts, gates. You can get pretty clever. I do recommend locking them just for your own security and making sure they don't walk off. So that's the basics. And like I said, when you put a camera out there and you leave it out for several months at a time, you'll be pleasantly surprised to see what comes across. So these are some of the highlights that are submitted from across our FotoFauna range. We'll go through a couple of them. So of course, this beautiful jaguar. This is at Quincos Los Ojos, just south of the border. It's pretty awesome to see a jaguar that close to the US. So hopefully he's doing well. Black bear, like we said, this is a pretty northern, or it's a North American species, but does dip down into Mexico. So any occurrence we see of bears is a big deal and is special to see. This one's looking right at us. And of course, there's more common species. That's what we'll see probably the most often. Here in Tucson, we get a lot of javelina. This is a gorgeous shot of one going across with the saguaros in the mountains in the background. And this is that same location. I'm not sure in New Mexico if you guys got that record winter like we did. I'm sure you did. This was a beautiful shot. And one thing to keep in mind when you set up your camera is it is photography. If you think about the angle where you're placing it to get the best shot, that way it's rewarding for you as well as seeing what cool critters are coming by. That one's this cool. Here's a lovely gray fox. There's two fox species in the Southwest. There's the gray fox and the kit fox. So do keep an eye on that, especially in New Mexico. There's probably more occurrences of kit fox. So if you put a camera out there, I'd love to know if you ever get a kit fox. This picture doesn't show it well, but the gray fox has a black line running down their tail, while the kit fox don't. It's kind of a big thing. And the color is a little different too. This is a nice daytime picture, which is pretty rare. And then this one is very special. These cameras are out 24/7, and there's no people to interfere with the behaviors of these animals. So you get to kind of see special moments in the lives of these animals, like these two rattlesnakes. We believe that they are sparring males, but you certainly wouldn't probably see that in day-to-day walking around your town or your neighborhood. So it is really special being able to see what these critters are doing and what's happening out there. Next, please. All right, so back to the details. So once you have your camera out and taking pictures, we ask that you submit a survey or a checklist with what you saw once per month, one camera per month. You're welcome to check the camera every 6 months and then do 6 different surveys. Depends on how far away your camera is and how curious you are. But say, for example, this is a selection of animals on our checklist. We asked, did you see it? Yes or no? If you go to the next slide, Eamon. Say, for example, for this camera, you only saw a handful of these. Javelina, you got a bear, that's cool. But you also got like a desert cottontail. You have some common species to keep track of trends and populations. From there, you would go online and submit one photo voucher of every single species that went on that list for that month. And rinse and repeat for every month. Say if you had it from January to April, you do 4, and then for each camera location. I personally have 3 or 4 cameras out and have to do it a couple times each check, which is really fun. Next, please. So this long-term data of having a camera out several months and recording it month by month is very crucial for looking at long-term trends and determining what are animals increasing, decreasing. It's hard to know why, but it does give a clue of should we be looking more into this? Is it worth having a more intensive study? So here, for example, there's 4 skunk species in the Sky Island region in the Southwest. And this is a camera I have checked for a long time, and it wasn't until over 40 months that I had gotten all 4 on the same month, for example. All 4 had been detected, but it had been almost 20 months since all 4 had been seen. And if you had checked your camera for 5 months and then stopped, we would never have known that all these species were present at that location. So this long-term data can inform conservation decisions, or if it's an endangered species that shows up, you'll never know until you look, basically. Also, if you get skunk bingo, it's really exciting because skunks are cool. So I keep alluding to this checklist. If you go onto the skyalliance.org/photofauna, there's a link to a Survey 123 checklist, and we try to keep it simple as possible. You just ask for your name, the camera location, as a few other little details, and which animals you see. Go to the next slide. And if you go to our website, it'll have a lot more in-depth trainings. We have recordings of how to submit in detail, what the checklist looks like, as well as species ID resources. Say if you're not familiar with the skunks of our region, we have some field guides and some other blog posts about how to identify the creatures out here. So next, Eamon's going to switch the live share into an example of our results page seen there in the middle of the website.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Megan, for that. And just to reiterate, we're giving a quick overview of the program and kind of how it works, but there's a lot of information on our website linked here, and we'll provide that information again at the end. And then please feel free to reach out and ask us questions. We have everything from pre-recorded videos that walk you through the process to open to doing phone calls or emails. We're more than happy to receive your questions and help you get started as we get started and learn more about what's going on in New Mexico. And just to kind of encourage anyone who's living in an urban area or thinks that, oh, I don't really have that much wildlife in my area, that kind of information is still really important. We get things that are unexpected, like an urban ringtail. And ringtail is this kind of nocturnal animal that's more associated with the mountains and rocky areas, and photos or cameras in downtown Tucson picked this animal up, which is insightful and really kind of opens our eyes to what these animals are doing and where they are. And other animals that are more common, bobcats, javelina, and coyotes, and these cottontails that are more commonly found in urban areas. It's still very important to understand how these animals exist within our human-dominated landscapes, as that can inform conservation decisions both within our urban areas and in our more wild spaces. So please do not be discouraged if you think you live in an area that's a little bit too developed or built up for a camera. These are very valuable data as well. And so I'm going to just quickly introduce or show our results page, which is a way to illustrate what we can learn with all the data you all collect and send us from your cameras in New Mexico. This is available on our website. In the center of the screen is a map, and there's a bunch of different points that all have different sizes, and the sizes of those points reflect how many species have been seen at that location through time. And as just confirm, is everyone seeing a website and a map? Okay. We mask everyone's location for privacy, so if you send us your data, we don't share any of the location information publicly. What you see on this map is actually a randomized location. It's moved just a little bit and then it's aggregated. So at a small spatial scale, points are kind of lumped together just to protect people's privacy, and so camera locations and private residences aren't revealed. But we can navigate around this map and you can zoom in and out of your area, and all of these figures update as you move through. You can also interact with this bar chart on the bottom, which just shows you where individual animals occur. So no surprise, our most commonly documented animal is a coyote. And we see that these coyotes are really documented throughout almost all of our cameras, from Hermosillo all the way up to Phoenix. We can look at a species that's a little less common, like a mountain lion, which we saw earlier. And we see that there's still a wide range of locations with mountain lions, but they're a little less common than the coyotes. And all the way down to things like badger, which are these really fun animal more associated with grasslands. But we see that they're in and around the Tucson area. So again, the value of these cameras on the landscape is we really see where and when species occur. I will show you two more things about this website, and you're welcome to explore it on your own. Like I said, this map is interactive, so you can zoom in and out. I'm not going to do too much of that. I don't want to make anyone car sick as we zoom through, but feel free to play around and zoom in to areas you're familiar with or curious, and all the figures update to reflect where you are. You can also toggle on and off different base layers or different ways of visualizing the data. If you want to view, one thing we've been exploring recently is by watershed, what areas have seen the most species. So if a watershed or if a basin has had more than 5 checklists, it gets added to this map, and it's a way to visualize species richness through space throughout our Sky Island region. So you can see we currently have cameras in these watersheds that are distributed from about Hermosillo all the way up north of Tucson. And this is just a way to contextualize and visualize data in space. If we turn that off, we also have different base layers that can help understand the degree of human influence on the land. So this is a figure that shows how bright the night sky is. In urban areas, there's a lot of ambient light from houses and streetlights and construction sites. And that's reflected up here in Phoenix and the sort of top left side of this map. Tucson is buried in our camera points, but it's throughout here, and you can see all of the places where there are animals and high light, and on the areas that are dark and also have animals. And so the condition of the night sky is a sort of under talked about, or it's not often included in conservation decisions, but it's becoming increasingly clear that wildlife rely on dark skies for their survival, for navigation, for communication, for breeding, for safety. So understanding how animals occur in the context of night sky brightness is yet another way FotoFauna data can be useful. I'll leave it there for now, but if folks have questions or want to learn more about this website, please reach out. Or just explore the website and let us know if you have questions.
Thanks, Eamon. I really love this tool, and I've used it personally and doing my job at Skyland Alliance when it's time to write a comment letter. You hear about a development project or an environmental plan that's been put out there. This is a great reference to be able to see where have these species actually been documented. So many of our agency partners are only documenting species on their own jurisdictions. And we really feel like it's our whole community's opportunity to help fill in those gaps in knowledge by including private lands and rolling in camera data from public lands, so we have a shared resource. So if we're successful in getting more cameras in New Mexico, we hope that this will become a conservation reference and planning tool that you all could use to have your own access to wildlife distribution data for your own conservation projects. So on that end, I would really love if you want to turn on your microphone or type into the chat. We would love to understand a little bit more from you what the wildlife conservation issues that you're concerned about, things that you're interested in. We're always trying to figure out how we can expand FotoFauna to fit the conservation needs in the community. And so we're really open to hearing what you're interested in learning more about or issues you'd like us to have on our radar.
Thank you, Emily, for that add-on and context. And so, yes, please feel free to put your questions in the comments or just raise your hand and start speaking through your microphone. While you're gathering your thoughts, I just want to highlight, we do have one participant. I believe they're here today. Thank you very much for sending in your FotoFauna checklist, our first ever checklist from New Mexico. A really beautiful area, and it's that highlighted dot in blue, and really wonderful location. Our very first elk on camera on our FotoFauna network, black bears, this white-nosed coati in the lower left, and that wonderful photo of a mountain lion. So thank you so much for participating, and we're excited to see more wonderful data from New Mexico.
Jamie is here. Jamie, thank you so much for sharing these photos. You should have, maybe you heard us all the way from Tucson. We screamed with excitement when we saw your submission. So thank you so much for the checklist you've shared so far. We do have some questions coming in, and you've touched on some of them already, okay. Eamon, but our camera sites in New Mexico and Gila National Forest or near Hermosa, would those be helpful to our effort?
Yes, absolutely. If there are existing camera locations that have been on the landscape, we do totally accept kind of what we'd say like our legacy data or data from the past. So you're welcome to send in data from a year ago, from 5 years ago. We accept it all. If they're going to be new camera locations, if it's a national forest, there is a permitting process. I'd have to read about what the permits required in New Mexico are. In Arizona, personal use cameras on a national forest are allowed for a couple weeks. And then if you want to go beyond that, you need a research permit. But happy to chat more with you offline. In short, yes, camera locations from those from the national forests in those areas in New Mexico would be more than welcome.
Okay, great. So a couple more technical questions. One is recognizing how often there are windy days with stuff blowing around. Both Megan and Eamon are experts with dealing with cameras that record a lot of vegetation moving. Do you have any tips or tricks to share about how to operate a camera in the wind?
Megan, do you want to chime in on this?
Yes, I do experience that a lot. Unfortunately, it is a fact of having a camera on the landscape. There are some models of cameras that are you can change the sensitivity level. I recommend reading the manual of whatever camera you have. You can probably adjust the sensor, but also we have a time delay. So a camera will take a picture and we have it set to about a minute. It'll wait and then if it triggers again, it'll take another picture. And that really does help reduce the amount of false positive or blanks that we get. But also think about the angle. If it rotates like 50 degrees, if it's not facing a bunch of grass or a tree, that could really help. So think about where you're putting the camera, look at the broader landscape. It's like, will that tree trigger it? Probably, and shift it a tiny bit. If it's your own property and you want to cut some grass, you're welcome to do that too. But it's a trial and error.
Yeah, I'd second that. It's definitely a little bit of trial and error. And then some other things to think about is if you do have a larger view shed and angling the camera a little bit lower, so it doesn't get too much of the horizon. If you are seeing and there's a larger shrub or a tree and it's blowing against the horizon, that can be something that triggers it. If you can angle the camera just a little bit lower to maybe not get the crown of that tree or the tops of that shrub where it's really moving in the wind, that can also help. And again, like Megan mentioned, setting that delay between triggers to a minute or so is a really nice compromise. You don't lose too many detections of wildlife, but you also don't get 60 photos in a minute of the same blade of grass moving.
Another question about what is it that you're actually submitting into the FotoFauna checklist? Or are you sending in images or a list? And maybe you can just comment. The answer is both.
Yeah, so Megan talked about a survey form online, and it's basically like a Google form kind of format where there's a series of pages and you click, you enter in your name and your camera location information, and then there's a series of questions, yes or no, for 42 different species of the region. And any species that shows up on your camera that month, you click yes, and that prompts you to upload one single photo of that species as a way to verify or confirm the record. Just like in iNaturalist, there's often that process of verification. So what we see on our end is like a spreadsheet that's got some answers to questions and then a photo next to every coyote yes, badger yes, and then we see an example photo of that coyote and that badger. We also have space in that form for just kind of interesting or additional photos. So if you had multiple photos of an animal, one is enough to identify it, but there were two more that showed really interesting behavior, like those dominance display of the rattlesnakes, things like that, where there's totally space in the checklist to receive extra photos of behavior or interesting things.
The next one is a question about coordinating borrowing a camera. Could you switch to the slide with our contact information? So Joe is interested in borrowing a camera so he can test and see whether fireflies will trigger these cameras to see if they will work for firefly monitoring. So Joe, please send one or all of us an email so you can arrange a time to check out a camera. Okay, so big question with a lot of different potential answers, but wanting to know what kind of software and process we use to go through all of the photos. We have different systems depending on what kind of, whether we're doing videos or photographs, and we're dealing with millions of photographs a year. So I'll let Megan describe a little bit more about that, but I'll just say as a FotoFauna user, I have 7 cameras around my house and I'm a little bit nuts. What I do is I copy all of them, I organize them in folders on my computer. And then as I go through them, when I have a best photo every month of a species, I save it in a FotoFauna folder for a month. So I can click on, I have what I call a tiny pond camera. So when I go to that folder to do that checklist, the best javelina, bobcat, coyote photos are just saved right there and I can upload them quickly into the checklist. But there are different software options. Megan, you want to say a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, it all starts with that same kind of file storage system of using like the file structure. I really recommend getting familiar with that. You can get an external hard drive if you want to store them on there. Just make sure they back up. But once we get those sorted and stored, we use a wildlife software called Camelot. It's a homegrown, developed from 2 wildlife biologists who are open source. That's the word I wanted. And we've done trial and error with many different softwares over the year, and Camelot has been the one that's stuck. It's free to use. It's a little bit of a learning curve, but I've really enjoyed it, and you're able to export results pretty quickly, which was a great advantage to it. And it's made for by wildlife biologists for wildlife biologists, which is also great. A lot of the other softwares out there for more photo editing and photography usage. So, but one of the same things, play around. If you know a software that would work better, try it out. If it's great, tell us. We're always looking into exploring new data systems.
Super.
And one thing though is you make sure you get on top of your pictures, otherwise you will be buried in photos. So if you're a librarian, make sure you stay organized.
Yeah, well, and Megan was around when we started this project, and it really came out of this idea that most of us, if we're not doing research, cannot possibly analyze every single photo in detail that we collect on our wildlife cameras. And so FotoFauna is specifically designed to allow you to skip pretty quickly through your photos and just pull out 1 per species every month. So it's a really low bar of analysis. We're hoping you can save all your photos if you want them, and if not, you could just pull out the very best of each species, and we just need 1 per species. So we're trying to make it really simple so that if you didn't want to be filling up your hard drive with all of these photos, that's okay. I personally, on my cameras, I shoot videos and then I take a screenshot of the best frame from a video to submit as a photo to FotoFauna. So if you are working with video files, you will need to figure out how to get a JPEG that you can submit to our portal, because right now it doesn't accept video. any other questions or comments at this point? Thoughts about places or conservation issues you'd like us to pay closer attention to? Well, we're very serious. You're super welcome to contact us anytime. All three of us are big wildlife camera nerds, love doing it in our personal and professional time. So we want to answer your questions. We really would love to see this camera program expand and be useful to all of you in New Mexico. After today's event, we'll be processing the recording, putting it on YouTube, and I will share out to everyone who's registered a link to the recording in case you want to watch it again or share it. And we'll PDF these slides so that you have them as a reference as well. And I'll get that out to you over email, probably in the morning. So you can expect that from us. And lastly, Sky Island Alliance, we do wildlife programming quite a bit. And so if you want to check back in with us and follow what we're doing, we will have other webinars that show the results of projects like FotoFauna, our border wildlife study. And we hope to see you, back on Zoom or out in the field. We're looking for an excuse to come and visit you all in New Mexico. So I hope that can happen as well. Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, Jamie, for the feedback that so far it's been pretty easy to submit into the FotoFauna portal. That's great.
Yeah, and just before that, there was a quick question about how to sign up or how to get involved. And really, all you need to do is go to that FotoFauna website, which we can provide the link for, and just click submit a checklist. You don't need to let us know you're going to do it ahead of time. We review every checklist that comes in on a monthly basis. So we'll see your new checklist and we'll reach out if we have any questions. But no need to sign up for anything in particular. You're welcome to just start submitting data.
And we do have a monthly newsletter called the FotoFauna Field Notes that goes out about once every month. It'll have a link to a video reel that shows the best photos that have come in every month, camera tips and tricks. If there's anything big going on, wildlife related, we'll alert you to it. So we're going to go ahead and add you to that email list. It's just once a month. If it's not for you, you're welcome to unsubscribe, but hopefully that will be a great way for you to get information about many of the species that we all care about. All right. Well, thanks.
Right, well, thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Star, for the thumbs up. It's been so nice to meet many of you this evening, and we look forward to being in touch. So happy wildlife watching.
Bye-bye.
Bye.